But at the heart of your question, what would he be feeling? Well, when you are psychotic, Pippa, there are stimuli on the outside, but there are stimuli on the inside. If you go into a psychiatric unit where there are people with psychosis, and you walk into the back room, the nursing station where the charts are, and you open a chart and you read the daily commentary on a particular patient, it will often say, who is schizophrenic, it will often say, or otherwise psychotic, it will say, responding to internal stimuli. What does that mean? It means they're hearing voices inside their head that sound like these voices, the ones that your listeners are hearing now, except they might be saying, you can leap 1,000 feet high, or it's not typically violent things, it can be violent things, or it can be command hallucinations that command the individual to pick up a knife and engage in violent behavior. Or they might be smelling things that are not there, having olfactory hallucinations, or they might be having visual hallucinations, or feeling things crawling on their skin, tactile hallucinations. So the fact that they have been removed from the stimuli that society offers does not mean that they are removed from stimuli. The problem, to get back to one of your earlier questions, is that societal stimuli can often interact with delusions in such a way to create the kind of behaviors that we saw in Holmes, and that we also saw in the shooting incident that has occurred in Wisconsin. So there is a role. There are people who will say, well, we just have to get rid of violent video games, or we just have to get rid of violent movies. And this is sort of magic bullet one-step thinking. It will not solve the problem, because for the vast majority of individuals, you can, and children and adolescents, you can sit them in front of a violent video game all day and all week and all year, or a violent movie, and they will not become one of these individuals.
But nonetheless, Dr. Lipman,
yeah,
is it? I mean, I'm a parent. Is it correct that I would allow my child to be watching violent films? I'm very uncomfortable with it.
Well, let's get clear. Point number one is that you can sit your child in front of Call of Duty or any other violent video game, choose whatever title your listener would want to, and in the vast majority of cases, they will not become a violent mass shooter, because there has to be already this underlying vulnerability within the person that combines with that material to create it. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have an effect on the child. In fact, a study by the American Psychological Association shows that violent media does have a kind of disinhibiting effect on children. Now, it doesn't turn them into violent killers, and it doesn't even necessarily turn them into more violent individuals in the sense of becoming people who might have conduct disorders, or in the more familiar term, juvenile delinquents. But what it does is it desensitizes them to violence.
Yeah.
It removes them from the idea, to make it even more specifically, to strike at the heart, because none of these games show this, or movies, that violence has consequences. The person doesn't just disappear and you get a new screen or a new scene. You remove a living human life with hopes and dreams and aspirations from the table, much like your own. What it does is to eliminate empathy. And this is of great concern, of course. It's not the same as creating mass shooters. But, there are many things we need to be concerned about in society, Pippa, and this is one. That these sort of glorifications and dehumanizations of violence, in many cases, dehumanize the individual and cause us to group people more easily into categories of friend and foe, and to see people more quickly as enemies. It's a deep and serious problem, but it will not create a Holmes or a Page. The situation there is more like, imagine that you have, in the situation of, let's say, Holmes, that you're born with a congenital weakness. Let's say that you have like a very weak bone in your leg, It's not broken, but it's very, very weak. And you can go through life and you can be walking through your childhood and adolescence and it feels just fine. Some of the time it feels, a little bit sort of loosey-goosey, but a little odd, but, you're basically fine. But when the stresses of later adolescent and young adult life begin to put pressure on that underlying vulnerability, that causes it to snap. And that's a pretty good metaphor for what happens with these psychotic disorders. There's an underlying strong genetic vulnerability, but it has to be released by a stress in society, and that causes it to erupt during this critical period of the late teens to early 20s. Now, your listeners who are in their late teens or early 20s, don't start to worry that you're schizophrenic, okay? Because if you're worrying that you're schizophrenic, you're probably not schizophrenic, because otherwise you'd be thinking of very different and very unusual ideas. About 1% of the population annually develops schizophrenia. Not entirely rare in the world of mental disorders, but rare in the world of occurrences in the world. 99% of people will not get it, so you need to think about it in those terms. That having been said, when it does occur, it is among the most serious of illnesses, and can sometimes, typically it takes other forms, but can sometimes erupt into violence, as we saw with Holmes and Cho.
Dr. Alan Lipman, who is the founder and executive director for the Center for the Study of Violence, Washington, D.C., the United States of America, a fascinating insight into the minds of psychotic or psychopathic killers. And your professionalism and your knowledge about the subject is fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure. And may I give your listeners my website, and I want to invite them, as I always do, if they have questions about these illnesses that they would like answered, I will do my very best to answer them. It is www.gcsv, that's George Charles Sam Victor .org. And if you click there, you'll see an email address, and you are welcome to ask questions, because I do want to try and help. It's busy here, so it may take a little time to get back to you, but I will do the best that I can for you.
But your generosity in wanting to speak about this, to help people to understand this and to be able to recognise perhaps something is wonderful. And I thank you once again, Dr. Alan Lipman.
Thank you, Pippa. It's good talking to you.
Bye-bye.